Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. First of all, Brian Whittle asked the Cabinet Secretary a question earlier regarding the yard. Genuinely, Mr Whittle, the yard was a working museum. It had received very little investment in that building, and also in the kit in that building. The workforce was still actually using kit going back to the 1940s, trying to build ships. So the yard, and that was when the yard was under private ownership. Also, sometimes nationalised in the 1970s, but the yard had a complete dearth of investment for decades. I'll take Mr Whittle's answer.
Brian Whittle.
Yes, the question.
If that's the case, why did you award the contract to them if in such a bad condition?
We need to speak through the chair. Stuart Millen.
So, as the Cabinet Secretary indicated earlier on, also due diligence had taken place, and also with
we need to hear Mr McMillan's
and also with
contribution.
With the investment that's going to go into the yard to try to update the yard, as it clearly has. And anybody who's actually been in the yard, I don't know if Mr Whittle has or hasn't, but anybody who's actually been in the yard will see a lot of investments actually went into that yard since 2014. Another point, actually, I wasn't going to touch upon this, but on Project Neptune. I've got grave concerns about Project Neptune, and I've already written to the Scottish Government about it. I mean, a number of us in the committee, in this chamber, have already attended some of the events that were hosted by the then Transport Minister, Jenny Ruth, and as a consequence of them, I did write to the Scottish Government because I genuinely feel as if Project Neptune will actually be potentially a wasted opportunity. And on Willie Rennie's points, I genuinely was really shocked that Willie Rennie's comments regarding the yard, clearly, according to Mr Rennie, well, he wouldn't have actually stepped in to save the yard. The yard would have been shut. Just 1 wee second, Mr Rennie. The yard would have been closed. And he's talking about £300,000 per employee. That would have been potentially just for the first 2 ships. So what would have happened since?
Willie Rennie.
At no stage did I say I wanted to close the yard. What I did say was that I wanted this government to do things properly. And if it had done things properly, we wouldn't be in this situation today and we'd have 2 ferries. But the government failed. Does he not accept that?
Stuart Millen.
What Mr Rennie said was he would have awarded the orders to elsewhere. That's what he said, Mr Rennie. So that's what Mr Rennie said. As a consequence, the yard would have closed. There would have been no yard, no workforce at that place. So, Presiding Officer, one of the things for me about this whole situation is that I want to put on record my appreciation for the workforce of Ferguson Marine. Now, this workforce, whether intentional or not, have been dragged through the mire in the whole story, and it has been completely unfair on every single member of that workforce. So this is where sections 226 to 231 of the committee report are extremely helpful. Now, the workforce at the yard have the skills, they've got the ability, and also the experience. And they want the best for the yard, and that's a sustainable and prosperous future. And I gently highlight to the Chamber, that the continual hammering of the yard does nothing to improve the morale of the workforce, nor their hopes and aspirations for its future. I've already taken a few, Mr Simpson. The narrative needs to change so that the yard actually can develop the future that we all claim to want. Now, with that, Presiding Officer, I'm keen to ask the convener of the committee a question. Now, he used the word rigged on the BBC GMS programme on the day of the publication of the report, yet that word doesn't appear in the committee report. In the sections 84 and sections 84 and 85 of the report cover this, with section 85 stating, and I quote, "While this is a serious allegation, the committee does not, in this report, draw conclusions from the BBC programme." Now, surely the convener would accept that using that type of language, even when paraphrasing somebody else, only plays into the hands of those who want the yard to fail.
Richard Leonard.
No, Mr McMillan, I've been fighting for that yard and for those workers and for those jobs for decades, so I'll not take lessons from you about who's on the side of the yard or not. If the word rigged was used, it would be a quotation, because that is the expression that was used by the team that produced the BBC disclosure programme. They said it was a rigged process. The committee's position isn't that we endorse that, but I would be merely reflecting that in an interview with the BBC.
Stuart Millen.
Well, that's certainly not how it looks to the transcript, convener. So, Presiding Officer, I fully support the actions that the Scottish Government have taken in actually helping to save the yard in 2014 and also 2019. And the awarding of the 2 vessels fairly secured the yard's future. Now, make no mistake, we have heard in this chamber and outside in recent months, if the orders went elsewhere, the Scottish Government would have been quite rightly criticised, and I would have been leading the campaign for the orders to actually go to the yard. Now, Neil Bibby has already touched upon the issue of work going to Turkey. If we didn't have the yard, then these orders would have went to Turkey as well. Now, we wouldn't be having this debate today, or many of the others that were already taking place in this Parliament, if the order went elsewhere. Instead, the residents of the new apartments that would surely have been built on the site of the former shipyard would be enjoying their views over the Clyde, living beside Newark Castle. Now, also, as far as the workforce, the Port Glasgow community and myself are concerned, Ferguson Marine must remain a shipyard for many decades to come. Now, the pie-in-the-sky ideas about shutting the yard and moving it to Inchgreen Dry Dock is a non-starter. In addition to those wishing to buy an apartment in Inverclyde with a view over the Clyde, there are plenty of places to go to see that. Shipbuilding in Port Glasgow must remain. Now, I welcome the fact that much of the committee, this committee report helps the reader understand more about the situation that has happened. And I know, however, that it is not clearly a unanimous report, as members have already touched upon. I also want to touch upon a factual inaccuracy which centres around my letter to the Scottish Government and the subsequent reply. I became the MSP for Gilbert and Inverclyde in 2016, not before. And I'm sure that Duncan McNeill would not be too happy about being airbrushed out of his earned position at the time as sections 86 to 93, but also preceding and subsequent sections contain this factual inaccuracy. Now, looking specifically at section 89 and the reply from the Scottish Government, I'm sure that a similar section and a division would have appeared if the then Cabinet Secretary or Minister had either not replied or replied providing no information. And as section 88 of the committee report states, and I quote, "The constituency MSP for Greenock and Inverclyde was undertaking his duties as an elected representative by approaching the then Cabinet Secretary for Finance, Constitution and Economy to ask what alternatives to a BRG existed in a bid to support the shipbuilding industry in the area they represent." Now, I stand by my decision to write to the then Finance Secretary. I was content that the Minister at the time provided information which I clearly shared with FML and the committee. Now, what decisions are taken thereafter was a matter for FML. Now, Presiding Officer, I think that the oral evidence document, documented in section 156 of the report, is also important to highlight.
Ms Macmillan, I'm being generous, but I think we need to start to conclude.
Okay. I'll finish this point, if I may, then, Presiding Officer. I think that the quote from the Chief Executive of Transport Scotland was interesting, and I quote, we still had the outcome of the procurement, which told us that it was the best bid for price and quality, and we had secured some negotiations of risk from CMAL to Ferguson's and from us with CMAL. Presiding Officer, I will not apologise for our government stepping in to save the yard, saving the jobs and getting those ferries finished, because that certainly is going to provide a future for many, many people in my community in the decades to come. Thank you very much.
Thank you.